You're looking at a photo of a company that was started back in 1898, and in the early 50s and 60s they had a laundry department, and in the foreground you can see the boiler where they used to boil the fabrics, and then the ladies would iron them. That is for the fabric. In other words, if a customer took 3 yards of fabric, they would cut 3 yards, they'd tag it, and they'd boil it, and then they would iron it and dry it, and then they would take it to the cutter, and the cutter would put the pattern and cut the shirt out. And they had a department for pattern makers. There was 3 sections: the pattern making, the laundry, and the cutters. And of course we had a sales force of 10 outside sales reps at that time, a total of about 40 employees. Those days are gone today. You'll probably never see, maybe in third world countries, but then they're not true custom made. They're made to measure, as much of the companies. There's several made to measure here in the United States, well known. They sell thousands of shirts, but they're not true custom. I'm sure they don't shrink the fabrics, shrink the interfacings. Most of it is fusible. So it's changed quite a bit, but I just wanted to let you know before we get into the actual shrinking of the fabric. And here coming, I'll show you a sample of one, that what happens and what it looks like when you don't go through the procedure of shrinking the fabric. Okay, I'd like to show you what happens when you don't shrink the fabric. And I hope you got a good close-up here. I'm showing you half of it, but you can see this is a non-fusible. And this is a well-known brand, and they sell shirts in the retail end, and they don't even bother with shrinking fabrics anymore. And they think just because they have a name that it's quality. But this customer sent me shirts, put all new collars on them. I cut new collars from the shirt tail, the same exact style. And they came out very nice. But this is what happens when you put water to it. They bubble. The fabric didn't shrink at the same rate as the interfacing. It's a non-fusible because they didn't shrink either one of them. And this is ultimately what happens. And then the cleaners, they're only concerned with output. How many shirts can they get out? Can they get out 600 shirts ironing per hour? They don't care if they're done right or not. And then the customer complains and they try to do it over again. But to ensure in custom, we always, as they so say, is shrink the fabric so that we don't have these kind of problems, especially in the non-fusible. Okay, today's topic is going to be called shrinking fabrics, and it's kind of a misnomer, and you'll see here shortly why. But it's something that shirt makers have to do to ensure that the collars fit a customer properly after washing. They take them to the laundry 2, 3, 4 times, and they're being notified that the collars are too small. And I'm going to show you some techniques to avoid the problems from the get-go. So I'm looking at some non-fusible interfacing, and this technique will apply to fusibles, but in a different sense. And when we get to that point, I'll tell you all about it. I have some Egyptian cotton, and the fabrics will be a little bit stretch in different degrees depending upon whether they're twills, oxfords, or linens, which have a lot of stretch, but the procedure will be the same. And it's something that shirt makers have done for 100 years, and it will ensure that your customer is always satisfied with the fit of the collars and cuffs. So we're going to start out with 2 pieces of fabric. I want to let you know that the salvage in is on both of them, and I'm going to make a point here shortly. But what we normally do is we wet it, and I don't use a steam iron. I don't know of any true collar makers, cuff makers that do use a steam iron. But what we do is we soak it, and I'm going to leave one without doing anything just to show you the difference. So you go ahead and soak it, and then what you do is you put the hot iron on it. The same thing, pulling it with your left hand, pulling it even now, and you shrink it until all the water is out of it, and just keep shrinking it. Now you'll notice that the one on the salvage end, if you pull on it, it's very stiff. It won't move at all. And I'll make a point here shortly, but in the meantime, I'm going to take a little bit longer just to prove a point to you. You'll spend a lot more time than this to make sure And this basically is applying to non-fusibles, because you know the reputation of the non-fusible. If you don't iron them properly, you're going to have all those wrinkles near the collar points. The same thing with the cuffs. So again, I haven't done very much, but I just want to make it a point that this is the part that I've shrunk. I'm going to show you the one that I haven't done anything to. And right off the bat, you can see that it's already starting to shrink. And I guarantee you, you'll probably shrink 3/8, maybe even a ½ inch. So what is the point? The misnomer is that we call it shrinking, but what we're actually doing is stretching the fibers to a point where they won't come back. And then when you put your template on them, they'll stay in place, or your pattern, and that's the final result. The fabric will be in its final result. Now watch what happens. This is cotton, so when you go ahead and put water on it again, you'll see that it starts to bubble a little bit. That's just the nature of cotton. Again, I'm going to go ahead and pull on it. And like I said, everyone will react different. This is good quality cotton. It's not going to shrink too much, but it will shrink. And this is usually what I do when I'm working on collars and cuffs, is I get a lot of shrinkage on it. Get a lot of heat. I have a cotton setting. And then again, I'll put the piece back on again. And you'll see that it's still shrunk a little bit. This is to ensure, again, when you finally put your interfacing on it, that this fabric is not going to go anywhere. Like I said, especially on the collars and non-fusible, a lot of them, they never shrink the fabrics or the interfacing, and they end up with wrinkles in the points. You've seen them. Same thing with the cuffs. So again, now I'm going to show you something else. Like I said, I have the selvage in here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the selvage off, because there's always least shrinkage near the selvage end. I'm going to cut all the selvage off. I normally do this anyway before I start cutting, because I don't want my pattern near the selvage, because I know that it will stretch after that. So now watch. I'm going to go ahead and soak it again. I'll go ahead and pull it same way. Like I said, you'll spend some time on it. This time, the couple of minutes that you put in now, will ensure that these don't come back to you. Redos are very expensive. No matter how cheap you make them, it's your time. So again, this is without the selvage on. I'll put the one that has the selvage back on. And you can see again that it's basically the same. But I'm sure that this thing is not going to go any farther than it is now. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the interfacing. Now this set of interfacing I've washed already in boiling water in the washing machine, and I always do that with non-fusibles. With fusibles, what I normally do is I allow extra length. For example, if the customer tells me he's a 16.5 and that allows for ease, I'll make him a 17, because I know that fusible are going to shrink ½ inch to 3/4 inch. I know it's going to happen. When you get collars in the mail and you see a label that says 16.5, most likely those collars were 17, 17.25, and they shrunk to the measurement that you took off that collar. So the customer sends you the shirt, he says, that shirt fits me perfect, and you measure it and it says 16.5. Now, the label says 16.5. You don't want to cut 16.5. You want to cut 17, 17.25. They will shrink to 16.5 if they're fusibles. And the same thing with the non-fusible interfaces. Again, even though I washed it in boiling hot water and then I put them in a dryer at a hot setting, I do the same thing. I stretch them just to make double sure that I'm doing it properly. And this way I'm sure that this thing is not going to go anywhere, especially on my non-fusible collars. Now I'll show you here. And look at that. Almost a ½ inch shrinkage in the interfacing. Now, as the interfacing goes, so does the fabric. So if this shrunk almost ½ inch and this shrunk 1/4, you're going to have a little bit of play in the fabric, a little looseness. So that's why you have to double check yourself. now that this piece is totally shrunk, when I put my pattern on it and cut it, I know it's not going anywhere. So when I put it on my fabric that's not going anywhere, it's going to be a perfect match. So again, it's knowing your fabrics, double check yourself, and you'll never get these collars and cuffs coming back to you because they were too small. And very important, when you analyze these collars, put the tape to them, no matter what the customer says. If he says 16.5 and you put it on there and it's 15.5, then something was bigger and shrunk to that stage. So always inform the customer that what he told you was incorrect, and this is what you recommend on fusibles. Always add 1/2 to 3/4 inch. They will shrink. The cleaners can do it for you, let me tell you. So your whole setup with shrinking, and like I said, it's a misnomer. It's really stretching the fabric to a point where when you stretch it, it's not going back anywhere. So in a way, you shrunk it because you put the actual pattern and it's not going anywhere. So they call it shrinking the fabric. And that's the whole crutch of it. So be careful and good luck.